The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Welcome to today's Hacking Cast. It's a masterclass on offensive MSBuild. We've had this talk in the past, and it was so popular we wanted to bring them back. So welcome, Joe. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And Chris will be joining us shortly. So we're going to wait for him. Oh, it looks like we do have the slides. Look at that. We didn't think we had them, but they're fancy. So for those of you that are new to Hacking Cast, we also offer training over with anti-siphon. So that's what you're seeing scrolling through on the slide deck. But we are in the Wild West Hackin Fest server. That's where we will be doing live chat over where the little bullhead is under Hacking Casts and Roundups. So we'll put a link to that in GoToWebinar. That's where we do all of the chatting. And we always like to try and find out where people are from. So happy time zone to everybody. And put a GIF in the live chat and let us know where you're joining us from today.
And Joe, we're really happy to have you on the broadcast today. So thanks for joining us. And I know we already talked about it. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, where you're located, all those things.
Sure, happy to. Thanks again for having me. And I know Chris will be here momentarily. So I am based out of DC, Washington, DC, so East Coast, from DC originally. Let's see, I have a pretty varied background. I got into security roundabout way. I started in sales, like cold calling, and then I got into software development, and then I got into cybersecurity from there. So a bunch of different experiences, but I feel like as a lot of people that have transitioned into cybersecurity from different careers, those other careers really help inform the way you approach tackling certain problems and providing guidance to clients. And so I think those are assets, those different careers. And then at FortyNorth, so we do pen testing, red teaming, phishing, the normal suite of services. And I focus a lot on web app testing. I lead most of our web app testing, and then I do a lot of initial access and red team work, as well as with Chris, who is our red team lead. And that is about me. Maybe a fun fact I'll give you guys.
Yes.
In high school, I started a DJ company, and then I became a club DJ in DC in college. Even though people don't believe I look like a DJ, I was a DJ for about 5 or 6 years, but haven't done that for quite some time. But yeah.
What kind of clubs? Was there a specific genre of music that you did, or was it just all kinds of just like club music?
So in the clubs, if you're good enough, they'll let you do what you want. And if you're not, or you're new, you have to do what they want. So I did a mix of those two. So when they made me spin what they wanted, it was typically hip hop and top 40. And then when I got to choose my format, it was all electronic music. So and this was 2007, 2008, which when electronic music was still like, didn't have the popularity it has today. So it's kind of on the cutting edge of spinning that music. So.
Well, I love the fun fact there, Joe. That's awesome.
Henceforth, he needs to be known as DJ Ponce. We refer to him as that internally. For any future work parties, we need to have him spin on the 1 and 2s. I'd love to see that happen. Once we're all in person, I guess. We're a little bit apart, but
well, maybe you can come to Way West and have a dance party for us.
Oh,
I think we're gonna be there actually. That's San Diego.
Hey, just don't ask us to do escape rooms. I don't know if Deb is on here. Deb can attest to how good we were at doing an escape room there. It did not go well. It did not go well.
Well, Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and tell us a fun fact about Chris?
Oh gosh, yeah, let's think about it. My name's Chris Truncer. I'm one of the founders of FortyNorth Security, and I'm lucky enough to get to work with Mr. Joe Leon. I am unlucky to have to work with my other partner, Jared Blatt. He's always fun. Hopefully some of you have got to meet him. If you do, please make fun of him as much as you can, because he helps apparently run our Twitter account, which I don't know if people look at the FortyNorth one, and likes to put embarrassing photos of me as often as he can. So that's great. I always love that. I think he got like a baby Yoda picture with my face on. I don't even know what his last one was last time.
That's a good one.
It was like to the point where I'm like, I'm just, this is good. This is going well. Yeah, my background's always been IT security. I love computer stuff. I could talk way too long about this all the time. It's just, I don't know, I like dealing with servers and stuff. I like trying to code different things. So really anything security related, typically offensive security is just topics that are very interesting to me. I get a lot of like value out of writing tools and then like seeing them, like using them on a test and actually working. So I think that's pretty fun. And random fact is I've recently gotten a lot into jujitsu. And I mean, I've trained for probably about 5-7 years, but I've started competing again. I love doing that. It's a lot of fun. I get beat up all the time. I'm constantly covered in bruises, which thankfully you can see. And but yeah, it's just something I like to do outside of security. That and scuba diving. Love going scuba diving as well. So.
Are you on the East Coast too? Are you in the DC area or?
Oh, well, I used to live there. I am now in a landlocked state out in Colorado, but I love Colorado. So
yeah,
it's
Colorado's
awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm right in between basically like Denver and Colorado Springs. Just got hit with a snowstorm yesterday, and we're getting hit with another one tomorrow. So I want like feet of snow. Like my best day is if I get like 3 feet getting dropped down on me. Like it's a relaxing, good day for me. So. Velda, you're shaking your head over there. It's like you don't want that.
Well, I'm in Nebraska, so we've had absolutely no snow, but it's like 27 degrees today. And yesterday, I think it was 15. Jake, the trapper, and Jason, the hawk, are all in Nebraska too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. No, I'm not really digging this whole cold weather thing.
Yeah. They're calling for potentially more snow here, like Friday and Saturday, and I'm just not. After the whole power outage situation, I'm over it for the year. Like I'm good.
How long do you lose power?
Oh, it was almost 4 days.
Oh my gosh.
It was terrible. And I had two kids, a 10-year-old and 16-year-old, and then other 16-year and 17-year-olds got snowed in here with us. Oh. And it was not fun.
Oh man.
I'm sure it was fun for them.
They would charge their phones on like my laptop so that they could watch YouTube.
Oh man.
I was like worried about like checking in on the power coming back and things like that.
Yep.
And of course I couldn't. My 10-year-old wanted to go sledding and do all this stuff. I was like, dude, we can't get warm. You can't go outside. Like, there's no way for us to actually get warmth again. So you're just gonna have. So it was fun. It was a very humbling single mom experience. I felt like we were like pioneers. Thankfully I had a gas cooktop.
Oh yeah.
So I could light it with a lighter, and so I could heat up like soup and stuff like that. But I can see how like people after like natural disasters just stay put because they're like, well, I mean, obviously the power is going to come back on any minute.
Yeah.
But it was
4 days.
When my heat finally came back on, it was about 47 degrees in my house.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah. It was not fun.
I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, and we used to have, like, when I was growing up, we had massive snows back then because I'm really old. But, I mean, we would be without power for days, too.
Yeah.
And it was no fun, Megan.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't envy you.
Yeah, it was, especially with all of the technology that kids are used to having, when that gets stripped away from them. That's worse than actual, the whole survival mode of the situation.
Where's my Roblox or YouTube?
I know. It's like, what? I can't play Xbox? What's happening? I think the world's ending.
We need like a second.
What do you mean I can't
generator
charge
for
my phone?
video games.
I could just plug it into the wall. No.
Yeah.
Power.
Yeah.
The Wi-Fi's down. Like, yeah, we don't have power. You understand the two run
Right,
together,
right.
right? Yeah.
Right. It all takes power. Well, I can just charge this and I'm like, no, that's not how it works. I'm sorry. I can't explain to you the matrix right now because I'm frozen solid. I'm an actual ice cube. So we're going to have to figure it out as a team. We played a lot of jacks and pickup sticks.
Oh, the classics.
Yeah, we really went old school.
Yes,
She really went old school there.
Yes, we went all the way old school.
I mean, now it's just like we need to play like marbles and like get a stick and like hit a hula hoop or something outside, right?
I know.
If you want to stay warm, you got to play Twister.
That if I would have had Twister, it probably would have been played. But I ended up getting a tent from my shed and putting a tent in the living room so the kids could sleep there and keep the heat in. And I built a like tent over my bed with a blanket to try and keep the heat in when we slept. It was very pioneerish. I felt like this is why I was born into this day and age and not in like say the Oregon Trail days. Like that was why I was born in this era. I channeled my ancestors for a couple days and was like, yeah, I don't like that. That's not good. So, but
Well,
speaking
Chris,
of like Conestoga wagons and stuff, we do have an event coming up. Way West. Are you guys coming? Or Joe and Chris, are you guys going to be there?
Yep,
Yeah,
we'll be
I
out there.
was gonna mention, we're super excited because FortyNorth is one of our sponsors at Way West. And so I've been working with Mr. Blatt on that. And so we're excited to have you. I do want to shout out to some of our other sponsors too, PlexTrack, Open Security, just to mention a few are on our list. Let me see, Scythe. We're super excited. We do have sponsorship availabilities still available at our Way West event. So if you're interested, please reach out to support@wildwesthackinfest.com and we'll take care of you.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get back out there again. That'll be nice. It'll be a good time.
San Diego is such a great city.
I don't know that I've been to San Diego. We were in Reno with you. I don't know that I've ever been to San Diego. So I'm looking forward to it.
Our theme is you hacked my battleship, and our testers have been putting together labs based on the battleship game where you can hack each other.
That'll be fun.
Which I think is going to be super cool. We're having dinner on the USS Midway.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's going to be super fun.
You'll have a better look at the hacking.
Have our Top Gun moment. I'm so excited. I cannot.
You're still lobbying for that volleyball tournament, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I think it would be, I don't understand why it's not being received as well as I'm pitching it. I think that the volleyball scene would be perfect. It would be the cherry on top of the whole experience Sunday. But we're having even for people that can't come in person, we're going to have a lot of really cool stuff. Obviously, we're going to be doing the Discord like we did with Deadwood, but we're going to have a bunch more augmented reality, which is going to be super fun. Well, people will still be able to participate that can't come in person, but I am stoked about coming in person. I cannot wait to get out of the house and go see everybody again. It was so fun in Reno, and then that whole being able to go out again got canceled again with COVID. But I think as long as the state of California doesn't shut us down, we're moving forward full steam ahead. So.
Correct.
I'm not really looking forward to the whole flying thing again, but.
Come on, you loved your time in the Reno airport, Jason. Come on.
Jason,
we bonded.
That was like Survivor for us. And
We did bond, yes.
It was a good thing. Well, no, it's going to be super fun, and we can't wait to see you guys in person. And it will be a great opportunity. So hey, I usually do a question of the day, and I'm gonna put one out here. So you can put your answers in Discord, and I'm gonna ask all of you to answer it too. Here's a question. Ready? 7% of people admit taking this from a hotel motel room. What is it?
Shampoo.
Wow. Only 7%?
7% of people admit to taking this from a hotel motel room. What is it?
A robe?
Any guesses
Oh.
in Discord?
That was gonna be my guess, was a robe. So I feel like 7% is too low for like
That is
shampoo or
low.
something.
That is
Yeah.
low. That's
I'm
true.
gonna go with the what is it? The Gideon's Bible that's in the side table.
Like Rocky Raccoon?
Yeah, because that's a low percentage.
I think that, like, if you steal a Bible, doesn't that put like all kinds of bad?
Hey,
That
you need
juju
Jesus
out
if you
there.
steal a Bible.
But it's only 7%, so maybe. I think towels or
Everybody takes the towels, Megan. There's not just.
yeah, that's
Right.
true. That is.
That's why I have to go with the Bible, right? 7% is really low for
Let's
for
see.
robes,
Yeah.
for pillowcase. Maybe the pillows.
Ooh,
Interesting.
yeah. Pillow or comforter, because those down comforters are nice.
Man, a comforter. I'm assuming they're charging you for that, because yeah, that is pretty nice.
So we've got sheets, hand towels,
The
TVs,
TV.
mirrors, anything movable, hand soap, drywall. That's interesting, Maxwell.
Drywall. Wow.
Drywall.
Copper in
Must have
the
been
wall.
some party.
Yeah, get all the
Yeah.
copper pipes
Depends
out.
on which hotel.
We're just like stripping the hotel room.
Yeah. Stripping all the wires. Got to get that copper.
Bed, the thermostat,
Maybe the remote to the TV.
the remote.
7%. That seems
I don't think
low.
I'd want that remote.
No,
No.
no.
I'm not touching that remote.
Yeah. That's
It is pretty nasty when you think about it.
shower handle. Wow, we are creative. The shower curtain.
I don't think there's anything left in the hotel
maybe
room at this point.
Did we have the
box
answer yet,
thing
Bilda?
that covers
We
the
did not have
tissue.
the answer yet.
What?
Left?
Oh, no one's guessed it. Wow.
The microwave, the key card because of the
The
NFC.
Keurig, maybe the little coffee machine that's in there.
Yeah. Pillows.
Coffee pot.
Unit. Is that Jared?
The iron, the
Yeah,
The
that's
fan,
Jared.
the lamp.
AC.
The
I mean,
hair
the
dryer.
bed. The bed.
The fridge. We've got the fridge, the microwave.
The hair
I mean,
dryer's
what
a
else
good
is in a
one.
hotel?
Hair
I
dryers.
love it when I have the answer and you guys don't.
What else is in the hotel? Like,
Light
right?
bulbs? Maybe?
Moisture.
pillow?
No.
That's a
Well, we
pillow.
haven't got it yet. Hangers. No.
The side table.
Toilet. Getting close.
The laundry bag.
I always steal that.
Wait, was the toilet closed?
I always
Toilet
take
paper then, maybe?
the light bulbs, curtain, the safe, the toilet seat. We're getting close.
Toilet. Oh my gosh.
The
Toilet
ironing
paper,
board.
Why would you want the toilet seat?
gosh.
But there's no
Yeah.
plunger, is there? I've never seen a
Plunger.
plunger.
Oh my God.
Not usually in the hotel.
The coffee makings.
The
Glasses.
glasses.
So
I'm
maybe-
trying to give a hint.
The
without
ice
giving it away.
bucket. The ice bucket.
Not the ice bucket.
Maybe we're looking at this the wrong way. Maybe we're just looking at the room, and we need to be looking at the entire hotel.
Hmm.
Brad, you're close. Brad, you're very close.
The actual
Actual
toilet is
toilet.
what's close.
Think
What's
about
left?
think about the toilet.
Think about I don't want to think about the toilet.
Have any of you guys stole the toilet paper from a hotel room?
No.
Why?
No.
That stuff is garbage.
Exactly. I'm like,
I
why would
know.
you
One
take it?
ply? One ply? No.
Yeah, it's like the septic safe. No, that's not. That's not good toilet paper. But I do, when I see
Guess
maid
that's it.
carts like in
Was
the
that the answer?
hall, I have to stop myself from taking things off of the maid cart. I don't know what it is. It's like this kleptomaniac comes out like, you need all those shampoos. And I don't need any of it.
So was that the answer? Toilet paper?
That was the answer.
Oh
What?
no.
And I'm in alignment. It's like garbage, right?
Yeah, that
I
stuff
mean,
is
it's
trash.
the
Yeah.
worst.
Yeah. I'm
Although
gonna
2 years
definitely
ago
put
it would have been
black away.
gold.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh
Yeah.
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 Well, I'm sorry to all of our European friends, but when I was over there, I had to bring my own toilet paper with me. Yikes.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why only 7% steal it. Yeah, that's fair.
Well, yeah, I guess that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because only 7% of people want to.
Right. Remember Velda back in like probably the 80s, like people would get those Holiday Inn towels that had like Holiday Inn like written on them, and that was like the big steal that people, but they would charge you if
Oh, yeah.
if you left the room and you didn't like turn in your actual key, or you didn't, if there was towels missing, you would get charged.
Yeah, I kind of remember that back when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was a baby in the 80s.
When I was a baby. Back in the 80s.
Yeah. I didn't have big hair in the 80s. It was just because I was a baby.
Wow. This is great.
You guys aren't that much older than me.
Okay.
I was thinking like mentally we're probably like on the same age range, but like maturity wise, I'm definitely younger, but
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Wow. Well, we are super excited to have you here. If you're just joining us, this is not the broadcast. This is what we call pre-banter. We show up early because you show up early, and you show up early because we show up early, and it's a vicious cycle, but it's awesome. We love doing it, and we love being here, and we love hosting awesome people like Chris and Joe on these things. So thanks again, guys, and thanks to FortyNorth for loaning you out for an hour here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We missed everyone, but I know we like this talk, and so hopefully it'll be a good one. Joe, what's your thoughts?
This was a really popular talk from our Deadwood event, our Wild West Hackin Fest in Deadwood. And because it was so popular, we wanted to bring you guys back for an encore on it. So again, thank you. Thank you for doing it then. Thank you for doing it now for this audience. So we're really super excited to have you. And again, a shout out to our sponsors for our upcoming Way West. We are super excited about that event in San Diego and all the things that we have going on with it. So if you haven't had a chance, pop over to our Wild West Hackin Fest website. Take a look at all the things. We're adding new things, and we're going to be adding more things here as far as activities to the event. We've got pre-conference training on the website as well. So we've added a bunch of new anti-siphon training to it. So we have some great options. So we'd love to have you come and join us. It's going to be fun. Also, just want to remind you, we do have anti-siphon training. We do host it live online. And so we have a great lineup coming up as well there. So anti-siphon, oh, hang on. I never can remember the website, guys.
Antisiphonttraining.com.
Yeah.
yeah, I think I posted it.
So it's good. So it's good. So we're seven minutes. No, we're 3 minutes till the actual webcast. What do you guys want to talk about?
Where do you go from toilet paper?
That's
Yeah.
what we want to talk about now.
Well,
literally down the drain. Like it's all down the drain from here.
Maybe we can have Joe give us a little bit of music just to warm us up for when we get started. What do you
Some
think, Joe?
techno beats.
Yeah.
I switched my mic. Can you guys still hear me? Is it just as clear?
Yeah,
That sounds good.
I realize you guys have been seeing this, but I wasn't even using this the whole time. It just was decoration. But now I'm
Decoration,
using.
Yeah, you've got to sing into it like that. My mic sounds nice.
Yeah.
Is that like way too old for people?
Ryan, did you get that sound there?
Please don't. Please don't.
It's
record
recorded.
that. Dang it.
It's on YouTube,
Yeah.
but everybody has
Dang
that
it.
now.
Dang it.
Joe
I
has
keep
been
Ryan to
forgetting
keep the
that it's not
soundboard out.
just us talking.
Joe has been known to sing into his mic and use some auto tune. I don't know if that's something he wants to demonstrate. No, I'm just kidding.
No thanks, but thanks.
Do
Really?
a rap about stealing toilet paper from a hotel.
Freestyle.
Freestyle.
Someone drop a beat. Someone drop your own beat. Drop your own beat, Joe. Make it happen.
Spit some rhymes about it. What rhymes with paper?
Yeah.
Joe's messaging me in the background on Slack right now how much he hates me. So
Just a little bit.
just a little.
Well,
It's almost time.
thankfully, you won't have to because it's right at the top of the hour. So we will let you guys take over.
Thanks again.
And we thank you guys again so much for coming on, and we can't wait to see you at Way West. And thank you guys for all of your continued support. We truly appreciate it. We couldn't do these things without you.
And we'll be in the background. So if you need us, just holler. So
Will
let's
do.
do after the show. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having Joe and myself on. We're here to talk. So we gave most of this talk previously on a masterclass on offensive MSBuild. And at the time, we actually had some stuff that we had reported into MSRC that about an issue that we have found that they have since said is no longer, not in their mind, not an issue. Is that accurate, Joe? It's a feature. It's a feature. I like features, right? So we're going to discuss that feature today, as in addition to everything else. So yeah, looking forward to. This is our talk, and we're just calling it like a masterclass on offensive MSBuild. So have a couple different goals for everything we're going to talk about today. First is to learn at least 4 different ways that we can use MSBuild to 5 now to execute arbitrary code, because that's always fun to do. We're going to look at and discover a couple different options on where we can store that code that we want to have MSBuild run for us. We're going to talk at a high level how we like to use it for really any stage of an attack lifecycle, from initial access, not so much. I wouldn't say we use it as much for initial access, but it could absolutely be applied there. Lateral movement and persistence are really more of the stages where it's pretty applicable. And then we're going to discuss a couple different ways that we have ideas on how this can be used, how you can detect this malicious use. So what is MSBuild? Again, we're going to be discussing pretty much everything that I said here on the last slide.
So I'm Joe. Brief introduction. So my background getting to cybersecurity was sales, then worked at a tech startup as a growth hacker, then full stack developer, and then cybersecurity. That was my career path. And so at FortyNorth, I focus a lot on web app testing, but I also do a lot of like internal pen test, red team work with Chris as well.
Joe also loves the social engineering side. He's the man when we need to like cold call someone or get someone to talk to people. That's his like bread and butter. And yes, I love the DJ in chat. Yes, he is our side. He does work DJ. He's amazing at that too, which I still need to hear a set. My name is Chris Truncer. I started in IT as a system administrator and then really moved into offensive security, and I've been doing that for the past at least 10 years, something like that now. I teach at a couple different conferences. We also run our own classes. I started a company along with my co-founder Jared at FortyNorth, and I use developer as a very loose term. where I like to write code that doesn't break, that doesn't exit out. It's just a bunch of random projects that I do. Most of it's all open source, so hopefully something will be there that can help you make your life easier. All right, so let's talk what is MSBuild, right? A lot of people may have familiarity with it, but let's break it down. So programming languages, this is like an official definition. Programming languages that target the .NET framework use MSBuild to project files to describe and control the application build process. You can think of it as like it helps to enrich your compilation or build process. When you interact with MSBuild, you can do so typically with either a CS_proj file or an XML file, and that'll contain like a wide range of different settings that you want to have apply when you compile your code. The file structure of those of CS_proj or .xml is, go figure, it's an XML file structure. And MSBuild overall, though, it really is in charge of like the entire, like taking your source code and compiling it in a specific way and specifying any unique things that you want to do to your code that you're writing, or that you're compiling, excuse me. And so the interesting thing about this is this also allows us to introduce our own custom, potentially malicious code to change additional things about either the code we're compiling or the build environment itself. So MSBuild is a binary that's installed by default on Windows. And like we've been saying, its sole purpose is to customize like how we compile our code. It can be found in a couple different locations. The two first ones are going to be the two main locations where we find those files, and that's going to be at those respective paths. The last bullet point is if you're installing Visual Studio, depending upon the version of, or the year version of Visual Studio that you use, your path is going to change, but MSBuild is also available within that installation path as well. So we discussed MSBuild. In order to control the compilation process, like we mentioned, we pass it in a file, and that can be like a CS_proj or an XML file. So how does that file actually look? Well, like we mentioned, it is XML in nature. And so there's going to be a couple different tags that are going to be present inside of it. The overall like top level tag is, or like the root node as it says, is going to be our project tag. And so this is just what is our main root node. The target is going to be the parent node for any tasks that we want to run. And then we can give specific tasks within our XML file. Like in this case, make dir. I'll give everyone a guess, like what does make dir do? It lets us create a directory. So super basic example, but as we can see here, we're specifying the path to a directory that we want to create whenever we invoke MSBuild along with this file to compile code. So we can use tasks that, like, we're going to talk about using tasks with MSBuild to get code execution on a system. So what is a task? Well, a task is an action that is taken during the build process. It is basically comprised of executable code. So what can a task do, right? Well, we talked about one, like that make dir task is where we can say, hey, whenever we're compiling like this application, I want this directory to be created. So that can be a task. Maybe we want to precompile ASP.NET applications. Maybe we want to change like a URL to a different format. Literally anything that you can think of that you can code, like your creativity is your limit. You can have MSBuild essentially do anything you want, and you would do so in the form of what's called a task. MSBuild comes with like included tasks. So these are just pre-built tasks that are like already made, that are accessible, that maybe Microsoft thought that, hey, this is useful, someone's going to want to do this, let's just write the code and make it available. So think of like that make dir task, like that lets us create a directory. So those are just pre-built options, similar to like just pre-built functions in like Python, like print, whatever it is that you might want to do. It's just code that's already there by default that you can leverage. The unique thing is this last bullet point where we can create custom tasks. And so those can be anything. And that's where we can really start writing our own tasks. So what does a task actually look like? When we're creating a task, there's a couple different libraries that we need to import. It's going to be the Microsoft build.framework.dll and the Microsoft build.utilities.dll. So within the build.framework library, it's going to have this iTask definition, which defines what's called a task within the build system. The Microsoft build utilities.dll defines a task class, which implements iTask, and then that makes it easier to write your own custom task. And so we would use that when we actually try to write our own custom task. This is basically over here in the code is just like a skeleton for the like screenshot of what a bare bones task may look like. Like we can see we're defining a class called simple task, and it's just this is what it looks like. So in order to create our own task, we need to create a class that implements this like task interface. And so if you can see, that's what's being done on our side here. We have public class, and we're calling this simple task. And then within that, the big thing is we are overriding this execute function. And we're going to override it with our own code that we want to provide. So in this case, it's obviously doing nothing. Like the screenshot's just returning true and nothing's happening. If we were to invoke the simple task right now as it is, we would see nothing happen at all. But we would actually obviously update this and have our code within that execute function do something, right? Like, well, hey, we can spawn a process like calc. We can do anything that the C#.NET language lets us do. So as you can imagine, we can write a lot of code to accomplish a wide range of tasks, for lack of a better term. How do we actually execute a task? So let's say we made and compiled that code that we just showed you, which ultimately does nothing, but let's just say it does something, right? Great, so we have our C# code. How do we actually do something with it? Well, within our CS_proj file or your XML file, what we're going to do is create a target tag that has any name. So like in this case, we can see the target in the XML says name equals my target. Like you can just provide any name, it doesn't really matter. However, within our target tag, we can add a tag referencing the name of our custom task class. So as you can see, between the two target XML tags, we have another sub tag called simple task. And it's called simple task in this case because that matches what we called our class name in our source code here. So they do match and actually are exactly the same. So as an example, if you want to look at any of the included tasks that Microsoft provided with us, so in this case, we gave a link here. This is actually for the make dir task that we've talked about a little bit. This is Microsoft's implementation of that. It basically does the same exact thing where we have the execute function that overrides or the overridden execute function. And it's a little bit further down below. But if you were to go to that path, that GitHub link, it would show you the full source code of it. And it's just an example. So it's kind of nice to be able to reference like publicly available code of how Microsoft or others have implemented this. So here's an example of what our make dir XML or CS_proj looks like. Now remember, this isn't the C# code that we're compiling, which is separate. This is the XML file, which is going to reference our compiled code. And so what's happening here is we obviously have our project tags, we have our target tag, and then the name of that is create directories, which is just a name that we provided. And then within that is the actual task that we're invoking. So in this case, make dir, and we're also providing a variable. So in this case, this is actually kind of nice because we don't have to hard code all of our values inside of our XML or our C# code. We can pass data in as parameters, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And this is an example of it, because if you look within the property group tags, there is an output directory with /output/ as its value, and that's what's being passed in to this directory's parameter of the make_dir task. So let's talk about code execution with MSBuild. There's a bunch of different ways that this can be done with custom tasks. I'll discuss external tasks and inline tasks, and then I believe I'll be handing it over to Joe to continue on with the included tasks. So for external tasks, we can create a custom task using basically the code that we just showed, compile that, and then call it from within our project file. So that's our XML or our CSproj file. Any code that we put within that overridden execute function is going to execute when MSBuild calls that. Now, we can have extra functions within our code, but the big thing is we have to have that execute function. But those extra functions we create just have to be called from within there. So again, here's an example. If we want to write our own external task and not use one of the pre-made ones that basically comes with our Windows, is we would use that skeleton code that we're showing right here, where this is basically all the bare bones, what is broken down to what you would need, and you can start with this. So within our execute function, we can have whatever extra code that we want. I think we're going to show an example of where we're going to spawn calc. We would take that code and then compile that into a DLL. Next, we're going to update our CSproj or XML file, and we're going to reference our DLL that we just created. So as we can see down below, we have our using task tag has been added in there with a task name of simple task, and the assembly file is the path to where that simple task.dll that we just compiled. Where is that located on disk? So this does require us to have it actually on disk, but this will be a way that we can reference that DLL. And then same thing, we can see within our target tags, we have simple task being invoked. That is the name of our class that we created. And that's basically all we need right now to be able to run an arbitrary DLL with MSBuild. And so at this point, we would just run MSBuild. And so let's show an example of this. So we can see right here, we have a super basic example where it's basically the bare bones code that we showed you, except we've also added in a line to start calc. So we can see we're going to call process.start on calc. But first thing we need to do is actually compile this code into a DLL. So we're compiling it into a library. We can see we have our references to the MSBuild required DLLs, and we're compiling this simple task.cs, and it compiled successfully into a DLL. Great. So now that we have that, we can use this within our XML file. And so we can see we have created a task that's called simple task. We're giving the full path to that DLL that we just compiled. And there's the simple task within the target tag. And we're going to compare that. And we can see simple task does match up, which is a requirement in order to invoke it. So we have our matching names. And now at this point, all that we need to do is just actually run MSBuild. We can run this, and we can see it did successfully run, and we did get calc to pop. I see some people, is it as small or is it just me? It's a stream for ants. Yeah, we'll be able to share these videos after, so that's not a problem. If anyone wants to see and look more at these videos just as examples, we're happy to share these out. So external tasks, like I had mentioned and somewhat hinted to earlier, can accept parameters. So this is pretty nifty, right? Because we could build a, like it mentioned here as an example, a shellcode injection DLL and not have any shellcode embedded inside of it. Like that's one of the things that AV may look for, is if it finds like memory injection routines where we're trying to inject and run data in memory, well, let's just abstract out any shellcode that we want to run and pass it in at runtime. Well, that's something that we can do with MSBuild. So I'm going to work through this a little bit. If we look at the very bottom Notepad file, what's happening, that's the run external file. And we can see we still have this code that we're referencing simple task along with the path to it. And then we have a property that we're calling my property. And then so that's simple task, and then my property equals, this is from the CSproj file. So we're embedding data within the XML or CS proj file that's not actually within the DLL, but making it accessible to the DLL. So looking at our C# code, which is in the middle for simple task, we can see we're overriding the execute function, and that first line basically is messagebox.show, and then we're invoking that parameter myProperty. That is a way that we can access that data without actually having it embedded within our DLL. Then finally, at the very top, we are actually running this file, the XML file, or in this case, the CS proj, and we can see we are getting a message box to pop up with the value or the data from the XML file. One of the questions is, what do you think of the OPSEC about this if you need to drop 2 files to the disk? Personally, this probably wouldn't be like my go-to, but with that said, I prefer to have more than one way to solve a problem. If I can only drop like text or source code, which we'll talk about here in just a second, I would prefer to do that than actually dropping compiled code, because regular text is, or like XML, is going to be able to bypass detection a million times better than dropping like malicious DLLs or malicious compiled code. But with that said, we can also try to help decouple like shellcode from injection routines to make it harder to combine the two and have like AV or EDR determine if something is actually used maliciously. So some pros and cons off of this is great because we can execute arbitrary C# code with it via MSBuild. But the con is this is not going to bypass device guard, or what's now called Windows Defender Application Control, because it would be using a non-malicious, or it would be using a non-trusted DLL on disk. The other con is we actually have to drop compiled code. So I'd like to not have to do that if I don't have to. The other option that I want to talk about is an inline task, and this is a preferred method more so than the external task, is where starting with .NET Framework version 4, we can create tasks of like arbitrary code within the XML or CS proj file. We don't actually have to compile a DLL or drop any compiled code on disk in order to get it to run. And so this just requires a small modification to the using task tag, and then we're going to add a couple extra tags within it. But now we can just use raw C# code. We don't actually have to drop an extra DLL. Here's an example. This is what our new skeleton code could look like. So you can see we have our project tag. The big thing is for tools version, we have to specify at least 4.0 because that's when this functionality became available. But then we have our using task, and within there we have a task name. And the big stuff where we're getting to is within the task tags are internal code tags. We're specifying that we're going to use C#, and then within C data, we can literally just write arbitrary C# code, like whatever code that you would want to write, and this will execute. MSBuild will compile it and then execute it, and you have your code execution with MSBuild. So here's an example. We can see we have our XML code right here. So this is good, or it's CS proj file, but it's all formatted in XML. Right here is our actual C# code that we want to run. So this is the same exact code that we looked at earlier in the previous demo, except instead of dropping a DLL, we're just including the C# code within our XML file itself. So what we're going to want to do now is invoke MSBuild, and then we're going to want to call this CS proj file, and we can see, hey, without having to reference or use a DLL that we compiled and dropped to disk, this method lets us actually just write the raw C# code, and MSBuild will interpret it, compile it, and get our code to execute. So there's pros and cons associated with this. The pro is that this is incredibly easy to do, right? Like we don't have to worry about bringing over compiled DLLs, dropping it on a disk, avoiding detection, and then still having to invoke it, right? The nice thing is that we can separate our code even further from the project file, which we're going to talk about in a few slides. Another nice thing is that we can host the entire file remotely. It doesn't have to be local and dropped on disk. The problem to note is, or the biggest thing that I think to take away when using this method is, even though we're not dropping a compiled disk prior, to invoking MSBuild this way, our code is still going to be compiled. It is going to be located within the C user, then your username, app data, local temp directory. And when MSBuild runs, it's going to compile that code temporarily and leave it on disk. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when it comes to detection techniques. I think it's up to Joe here.
I will pick up from here. So I'm going to cover 3 additional tasks. These are actually going to be built-in MSBuild tasks that we can misuse to execute code. One of them just commands, but similar to what Chris covered. So the first is unregister assembly, and a lot of credit goes to Casey Smith for uncovering how this works. But the basic idea is there's an unregister assembly task in MSBuild, and when you call it, you pass in a .NET compiled application, and it will look through and look for a com unregister function. And so basically what happens is when you call unregister against an assembly, it's going to look for a function. If it exists, it will execute the code in that function. So what that looks like with MSBuild is we're going to call an unregister assembly task inside the target. So this is just what Chris was showing before. So same sort of deal, just different task name. And we're going to pass in an assembly. So this is going to be our malicious assembly. And I'm going to show you guys what that code looks like. So the first thing we'll do to actually execute this vector is create a .NET assembly in, well, we got to write it in C# first. So here's the C# code on the right-hand side. And the key component is we need com visible to be true for the class, that attribute. And then we want to designate a function, a static void function within our one of our classes as com unregister function. And so that will highlight to the unregister assembly task that this is the function you should run when you're unregistering this assembly. There's a lot more to what unregister assembly does and why it's used, and it's a bit beyond the scope of what we're talking about now. So if you're interested in that, please go down that rabbit hole. But suffice to say, if you put com unregister function above one of these static void functions, it will execute that. And so then we, like I showed you before, you need to drop a DLL to disk, and then you will reference that assembly in the unregister assembly task. So here's a quick video demo of what's going on. So first we'll take a look at it's going to be called unregister.cs. So that's going to be our C# code. And you can see here, that's just the code you saw on the screen before. We're designating a com unregister function that will pop calc. We're going to compile that with CSC. We're going to create it into a DLL, so that's /target library. So we see that DLL was created. This is our C# project file, which also is just named run.xml in this case. We're referencing the assembly. That's where it's located. And then we just call MSBuild and that run.xml file. And that will pop calc for us. So just another method. Pros and cons here. So the pros, well, our DLL can be hosted remotely. So that's kind of cool. So you could use a UNC path to either a remote web dev server or a file share in the in an internal network. I think this appears less malicious. That's a super subjective, does not appear malicious. So I think it appears less malicious. Down at the bottom, you can actually see what that UNC and that web dev operation looks like. Well, so they're going to create a file that's going to be stored on disk called .dll. Based on, so it's going to copy down that file. So just know that it will drop that DLL to disk temporarily. And if you're looking on how to spin up a web dev server, Black Hills has an awesome blog post that I reference a lot. If you just look up Black Hills and web dev, I'm sure, or somebody can post it in Discord, I'm sure you'd find it. So those are the pros. The cons, kind of already alluded to this, but you do have to drop a DLL to disk. It's a few more steps than what Chris showed last, which is those inline tasks. And it won't bypass more advanced application whitelisting controls like device guard, because this is an untrusted DLL. But it is another method. Here's yet another method. So this is method 4 called XSL transformation. So an XSL file is basically like CSS for an XML file. So it will style an XML file. So XSL is what we're talking about. And if you're at all familiar with using WMIC, WMIC for like in like a application whitelisting bypass scenario, this method should sound pretty familiar. All credit to the Bohops here who tweeted about this in 2019. So this isn't something super new, but to be honest, I don't see a lot of people using it. This method requires 2 inputs, XML, and this is bare bones XML. So as long as it is valid, syntactically valid XML, you're good to go. It doesn't have to have anything in it really. And then XSL, and then this is where our malicious code is going to live. So those are 2 inputs, and there are 2 locations where each of those could be. So the XML and XSL could both be inline, so within your C# project file. And if that's the case, you're going to use XML content and XSL content within the XSL transformation task. I'll show you what that looks like because that's a lot, just a lot to digest. Or you could put it externally to the C# project file, and that could be hosted locally or remotely. And in that case, you would just provide an input path to either of those files. So here's an example of what this would look like. Again, same, like just look at the very middle of that screenshot. That's all that's new. The target, all that project, we looked at those tags before. In this case, we are creating an XSL transformation task. And in this case, these are locally hosted, but external to this file, XML and XSL files. So in that case, we're saying in XML input paths, we're saying, here's the path to the XML file, and an XSL input path, here's the path to the XSL file. And note the plural for XML. That was kind of annoying to debug. So what do those files look like? Well, the XML file could not be more boring. You can see it there on the left, like it's literally bare bones. And on the right is where our malicious code will live. So in this case, our arbitrary C# code goes inside the C data tags, just like kind of like before. But basically what we're doing is we're declaring a script with the namespace user, that's on line 4. And down at the bottom where it says template match, it says template match on the slash. That just means like it's gonna match to this XML file. And then we're saying select user run. So we're basically saying grab this function run from the namespace user in the script and execute it. So, I mean, there's some more ways you could try to like obfuscate what you're doing a bit more with this, like get a bit more clever on when you match your XML file. There's more you could do. You could change the name of the namespace. I believe you can change the name of the namespace, but don't quote me on that because I feel like I tried that and that caused some troubles. But basically, this is like a proof of concept how it could work. And so let's take a look at a quick demo video here. So this is the XML file that you saw on the previous screen. Again, nothing special. And then the XSL file is where malicious code lives. So again, this is just, we're declaring a C# script, quote unquote. In the user namespace, we are creating a run function or method maybe. We're starting up calc. And then toward the bottom that's highlighted there is where we are executing that function run. And then we'll take a look at our C# project file, which is called XSL test external C# project. And here you can see we are within the target tag, we're creating an XSL transformation task with referencing those XML and XSL files you just saw. A lot of files in this one, to be honest. It kind of sounds like a pain already. I'm sure you're thinking, why would I use this? Fair question, but it's another method, right? And so we're going to call MSBuild against that C# project file. And, you know, unless the video changed, it should pop calc. So there we go. So that worked again. So I did mention before that you don't have to use external files for your XML and XSL. So if that's the case, the one thing to know is that you need to escape the following 3 characters, and it shows you that's how you should transform them. It's really a pain. XML I could get to work easily inline in the C# project file. The XSL content inline wasn't working for me, due to some security settings. So it's possible that these will be in place on machines that you're on. I imagine they would be, but it's also possible they might be disabled. So it's something to just investigate. So in the next example, we have XML inline. So you see XML content declared with some really ugly XML. That's just the same.
That looks disgusting.
It's honestly figuring out how to create it was terrible. And then you have the XSL input path referencing that same XSL file before. And then that would produce the same results of executing your arbitrary C# code inside the XSL file. The pros of this method is we can host our XSL file remotely, which is kind of cool, right? So you could put the XML, that really ugly XML inline in your C# project file, and then remotely reference the XSL file. So you really only need one file on disk, which is the C# project file, which also could be hosted remotely, which we'll talk about later. But so it really doesn't have to be like 3 files on disk. You can really honestly have 0, but like 1 in this case would be fine. You don't have to pre-compile into a DLL. So that might be a reason to choose this option, because I don't know, just running CSC and then compiling it into a DLL isn't a big deal, but sometimes you're lazy and you don't want to do it, or you want to be faster. So that's an option. And then another reason to consider this is we've seen a lot of defensive controls and software picking up on the use of code task factory. And that is used, you might have picked up on that, that's used in inline tasks. I remember one engagement we were coming up against, it basically just stopped us from using MSBuild only when we referenced code task factory. The minute we removed a reference to that, so using one of these other methods, it executed perfectly fine. So that could be a reason to use it. The cons could require more than 2 files, but also might only be 1 to 2. That syntax really is a pain, but you can just use our template instead. And malicious XSL file usage is like well known, especially from WMIC. So just know that's a constraint. So this is new. We haven't written about this yet, I don't think. So we probably should write a blog post on this. And this is what we reported to Microsoft just to get their opinion, like, is this a feature or not? And it is a feature. So this was not in the previous presentation. This is new for everyone to see. So there's a task called generate resource. And what that does is it runs a binary called resgen.exe. So that stands for resource file generator. This is a Microsoft binary. It's not on every system, so you might need to bring it with you, but you could host it remotely. And basically what this binary does, this application does, is it converts, well, so when you have a .NET application, sometimes you need additional resources, an image, objects, whatever it may be, and this will convert a text formatted version of that into a binary version of that. So it takes in .resx files and outputs .resources files. If you've done any like C# .NET programming, you've probably seen like .resources files before. So resgen is what will create these from your text-based version. So that's the task. I'm going to take a quick detour because I think this is kind of cool for us to share how we found out about this this attack vector. So like basically we're just going through MSBuild's documentation, looking at different built-in tasks, and then like just Googling like remote code execution and the task, like not super complicated stuff. But we stumbled upon this like super well-known CVE from 2 years ago about like remote code execution on SharePoint servers. I'm sure a lot of you guys and gals remember this CVE. It was pretty big. And if you dig into, in this case, this is from Zero Day Initiative's blog, into how it worked, basically in terms of how to exploit it, this is like a snapshot. I'm not going into like why the vulnerability exists, just kind of like how they exploited it. Basically what you would do is you would use resgen to convert a resx file. Remember, that's the input file with some malicious payload. You convert it into a .resources file, and then SharePoint would deserialize the .resources file, which would execute your code. So this is a deserialization vulnerability. And so that's the basic idea here with that CVE. Whoops, jumping ahead. So before we get to the next slide, I just want to call out a few things. This code that is in the middle, this is important for us to keep in mind over the next couple of slides. So this is like where our malicious code lives. The malicious code is the base 64 encoded binary formatter payload. That's in that value, those value tags. that we're going to generate from whysoserial.net. If you're not familiar with whysoserial, that is a deserialization payload framework. So basically you can say like, I want to execute this command, create a serialized payload, and then when it's deserialized, it will be executed. So our payload, and I'll cover in a video demo like how this actually works, but our payload's going to live in these value tags. And then I want to note here, these are data tags. Just two things to note. One, we have a MIME type of binary base 64, and there is no type attribute. Right? We have a MIME type attribute, but there is no type attribute, and that'll be important in a second. And in case you're wondering, like, what kind of file do I put this code in? Like, where does this live? This is in a resx file. This is what would be the input file to resgen, which would then create it into a .resources file. Again, we'll show this in a demo video, it'll be a bit clearer. But so, and again, remember, MIME type attributes here, we don't have a type attribute. Okay, so we figured that out. That was from the SharePoint vulnerability, the CV. But now we were looking at MSBuild's public documentation, and we could see that this is the generate resource task code that's publicly available. And the middle box here is the critical one. It says if there's a MIME type and no type, which is what we have, we can't tell the type without deserializing it. So basically what MSBuild is saying is, for various reasons, if you're sending me this resx file with a payload that looks just like this in the middle, I'm not going to fully understand what to do with it until I deserialize it. And that's the issue here.
There's never been any problems with deserializing stuff, right?
Oh, never. Yeah.
There's not a class of like vulnerabilities on that.
Oh, definitely not.
Or attacks.
So we're calling this needs separate app domain based on serialized payload function, which will then determine whether serialized object loads, which will then deserialize using binary formatter our payload. And that's the problem. And the reason we reported it to Microsoft is we were saying that like basically like the way you wrote this is it's deserializing input that anybody could submit, and then their response was, well, you already control the input. So fair enough. This is a feature. I think this is coded poorly, but there must be a reason why it was coded this way. But again, the whole issue is MSBuild is in the process of creating a .resources file, which is a one-way direction. It is then reversing that direction and then immediately deserializing the payload. And that's what will execute your code. So to create a payload, we used whysoserial.net, so you could grab that. That's open source. These are the commands we used, specifically referencing binary formatter, and our command was to pop calc. And here is a video of all of that happening. So first, we ran that command that you just saw. That outputs a .resx file. So there, that value bit down at the bottom that was base64 encoded, that was our serialized payload. So we're going to throw this into a file, a .resx file. Note that we do have resgen.exe in our current directory. So we're going to throw this into a file. Again, at the bottom, that all that junk there, that base64 stuff, that's going to execute calc. Take a look at our C# project file. In this case, we are calling the generate resource task, passing in the source, which is this resx file. Output doesn't matter. And then the SDK tools path. If resgen is already installed in your system, you don't have to worry about that. If it's not, you'll have to bring it with you and reference the directory that it's living in that SDK tools path attribute. And then we call MSBuild just like before. And sure enough, don't worry about the errors. Well, maybe you should worry about the errors. I don't want to say don't worry about them, but if it errors, it doesn't mean something's gone awry. It's kind of what I found, but it will pop calc for you. So that's a totally new method that we've seen, or we haven't seen, but we figured out how to use, and maybe others have independently figured it out as well. Cool things is this is deserializing a base64 encoded payload, so it should bypass various controls because it's just a deserialization vulnerability. It's not temporarily dropped and compiled into the temp directory, which is nice. The con is you do need resgen with you, and at the moment you can only execute commands, but resgen can be remotely hosted. If you host it on a WebDAV server, on a server that you can control, this is what it would look like. You reference the path where it lives, and then you don't need to drop resgen with you. So now the con list is a bit shorter because you can host that resgen remotely. So you only need that resx file on disk. So kind of a cool method, something new. I guarantee you there are other ways to execute arbitrary code or commands through built-in MSBuild tasks. If you're interested in doing research on it and you want to collaborate, especially folks that are maybe a bit more junior or maybe in college or whatnot, if you want to collaborate on a blog post about this stuff, we've blogged quite a bit about MSBuild, so we'd be happy to like co-write something. So just an opportunity if anybody wants to take us up on that. I'm going to quickly cover a few other ways to house our malicious code. These are going to be related to inline tasks primarily. So this is that method that Chris discussed where your C# code is inside your MSBuild C# project file. So it's this format. And specifically, we're going to look at this code tag. And we're going to look at 3 elements of it: language, source, and type. So language allows for, so we can write C# that we've been seeing. You could also use Visual Basic in case that's of interest. Maybe that would be helpful for OPSEC purposes. I am also convinced, so Chris and I have done a presentation on F# and using that for offensive stuff. I'm convinced, we don't know, but I'm convinced that you can put F# in an MSBuild file. Technically, I guess it'd be an F# project file. I haven't gotten to work. If somebody wants to work on this with us, like, please, we would love to. But this is the latest error I've seen. So I think it will, but I can't guarantee you that'll work. But for now, C# and Visual Basic are both options. Code source, so this is cool. So you don't have to house your code inside your, if you're using an inline task, you don't have to house it inside that C# project file. You can use the source attribute of the code tag, which you see highlighted in the bottom right, to reference a UNC path. So this could be hosted on a file share or on a remote WebDAV server. And in this case, like literally the code that you've seen us reference a lot, we're defining a task, overriding execute. We just ripped that out of the C# project file and hosted that remotely, and that will execute too. So that's a pretty cool method as well. So you can separate, it's always cool when you can separate aspects of your payload. What will that do? So first it's going to download your remote hosted C# project file. That's down here, if you can see my mouse, and then down toward the bottom, it's creating a DLL by calling CSC. So it's still doing the same thing inline tasks does, creating a temporary DLL in your temp file, just slightly different. We've also said this, you can remotely host the entire C# project file. So here you see in the bottom right is us referencing a UNC path to an XML file, which is just our C# project file. So nothing even has to be on disk, which I think is cool too. And I'm sure there's layers of this where you can remove and remotely host in different places, different aspects of your payload. You can also remotely host, this is for the like custom tasks method, so not inline, but they're external tasks that Chris showed. You can remotely host that DLL too. A lot of options for you, and there's a lot of different reasons why you might want to do that. For time purposes, I'm going to keep moving. So this is another, like, if generate resources was like brand new for everybody to learn about, this is one that I think will be new for a lot of folks. This is one of my favorite aspects of MSBuild. If you have local admin access, this will apply. So this is really good for persistence or moving laterally when you have local admin. So the idea here is much like DLLs, MSBuild has a search order for discovering where the code is to tell MSBuild how to treat inline or how to treat pre-built tasks, right? So if you called make dir or copy, that code doesn't live in your XML file. That code is on your computer somewhere. It's dropped when you install MSBuild, and typically it's installed in a .NET Framework directory, and it'd be called copy.tasks or makedir.tasks. Well, there's a way to, and that's the default. We can override the default by dropping .override tasks files in the same directory where MSBuild lives. And you can only do that with admin access, but think about that. Like, that allows you to call a very like benign copy function, but it will actually execute your code. So the way this would work, and there's a video I'll show you in a second, is you would create a copy.override tasks file. you create your MSBuild C# project file, which will execute it. And because it's looking for override tasks first in that where's my task file located, it will execute your code. So this is what a .override tasks file would look like. In this case, we're overriding the copy function. You can see that at the top here. And then just like before, we have our malicious code, which is popping calc below. And then you could just call this is just from MSDN, like Microsoft site. You can just call the default like XML file. And when you call this copy function, if you have a copy.override tasks file on disk, it will execute your version of the copy function, which is malicious, instead of the default built-in one. So this is just like our version of what that MSBuild file could look like. And here's a quick demo of that. So we are looking at a copy.override tasks file. This is what I showed you a few slides ago. We are creating a task called copy, which will override the original copy task. We're keeping the same parameters, so it looks like a normal copy task, but we're popping calc. And then we are going to take a look at our C# project file, and we're calling copy. Again, this is a built-in command, so this looks totally normal and benign, but because we have the override tasks file, it's going to execute our malicious code instead. And when we call MSBuild, you will see that it pops calc and executes our code. So I think that's a super cool method to execute your code, especially if you need to persist. And last, I'll just briefly cover these because we are coming up on time. I want to make sure Chris can finish here. Is in terms of your code type, there's three options. You can write a class, a method, or a fragment. This is what a class looks like. This is what we've shown you before, where you have all your library import statements, you're defining a class, you're overriding the execute function. You can skip some of that and just override an execute function, which is kind of handy. You just say this is type of method, right? So this is a method. In this scenario, you can have multiple functions in there, but you do need to have the execute method. Or you could say fragment, and it's literally just the code that would be inside your execute function, process start. So with that, I will hand it back over to Chris.
Thanks, Joe. So try to finish this off. I'll go a little fast to make sure we're good on time. Is when we're running like MSBuild, we're having to pass in like that XML file, that CSproj file, right? Like, because that's containing all of the data on like whatever code we want to do or run. Well, the problem is with this is we're providing like the command line argument where in case there's any command line auditing happening, well, blue team or defenders or anyone is going to know exactly where what file we're invoking and where it's at. So a neat little trick is that if we move or copy MSBuild into a directory where our XML code is in the form of a .csproj file, and as long as it's the only CSproj file in that directory, when we call MSBuild, MSBuild's automatically going to run that and does not require that second parameter of the file containing what it is we're looking to do. So let's look at a demo, but it's kind of cool because it eliminates the need for that second file. So we're going to show right here when we run this, or I believe first going to show, okay, yeah, all the data is in here. We have this run external.xml file. When we run that and pass that in, we get calc to pop. Well, what we can do is we can move that to a run external.csproj. And so now, if we were to actually run MSBuild and just MSBuild, we can see we did not provide a path, or excuse me, in this case we did, but now we're going to just run just MSBuild without passing that CSproj file as an argument in there, and it will get our code to execute. So it ran, and there we have calc popping. So it's a neat little way to get around the requirement of having to pass in the path of a file, as long as MSBuild is you're within the directory where your CSproj is when it's executed, then you can avoid needing to call it that way. So let's high level very quickly talk about MSBuild from an offensive perspective. This can be invoked in initial access methods in case you want to run it in a macro. Now, if you're already getting VBA execution, do you really need to invoke MSBuild? Probably not, because you already have VBA code being executed at that point. But This is just to show you as another option, like it is possible to do so. Like I said, I want 10 different ways to perform the same task. So I like being able to also invoke MSBuild via this way. If we like XLM, Excel 4.0 macros, well, we can just use this exec command and basically provide it the path to MSBuild and our XML file. Then, hey, we can get it executing in that. So we're not having to use VBA. It's just an XLM 4.0 macro. If you really wanted to, I don't know why you would go this route, but you could have an HTA that writes a file to disk and executes it. Granted, that's probably not the first path that you would take, but maybe your first path is being blocked or detected and this one doesn't. So there's a ton of different ways that we can use to get this functionality up and running. And it's really just up to your creativity. So yeah, like someone mentioned, like the more options we have, the more chances of success. Like, couldn't agree more. Like I want code written in different languages in different ways that ultimately do the exact same thing. In the event that one method is blocked or two methods is blocked, then I got a third that I can fall back on and try. From a lateral movement perspective, we love using bypasses like this for lateral movement. At least, like that is my go-to. I'm always performing some form of a bypass. The nice thing about this is we're not having to drop like a full tool on disk. We're just modifying like the loader that we're using, right? In this case, it's MSBuild is our loader, which is installed by default. So when we leverage bypasses for lateral movement, we do these typically on systems where we have admin access. But the nice thing about using this is because they're typically always installed on disk as well. So what we may do is, one example is we may have an XML file or a CS project file that we store on a network share that's accessible probably to everyone. Because it's an XML file, that's, I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, probably 95 times out of 100, not going to be detected by any sort of EDR product as being malicious because it's just text, right? And then we may use something like WMI to invoke MSBuild on a remote system and reference that XML path on a network share and use that to get code execution lateral movement with this. Persistence is largely the same thing. The bypass can be stored in a directory where we write to. Definitely consider what Joe was talking about with the override tasks files. That's a cool, just like spin and a unique way of getting your code executing while trying to make it look as normal as possible, right? And at that point, once we have it set up, then our method of invocation again is back to being up to our creativity, right? Run keys are bad times. I don't like registry run keys. If we've talked, you know how much I hate registry run keys, but it's an option. There's scheduled tasks, WMI-based persistence, just tons of different ways that you can get your code to be executed in any standard manner that you could think of for persistence. We wanted to also call out there are other open source tools that leverage MSBuild. This is Covenant. So Covenant has its own launcher inside of it that can be used to launch a grunt to interact with Covenant. We have malicious macro MSBuild. So this generates a malicious macro and executes PowerShell or shellcode via MSBuild. And we also have another tool like Powerless Shell, which does rely on MSBuild to remotely execute PowerShell scripts. So these are nice because they all ultimately leverage MSBuild. I forget which attacker this was, but there was a write-up at this link below of like a real-world attacker leveraging MSBuild to load their actual rat and whatever tools that they wanted to use. So at a high level, how can we try to detect MSBuild? So we wanted to give a couple thoughts on it. So let's look at them. So one thing is through the use of temporary files. When we dynamically load and run C# code through MSBuild, and so this is when we're talking about like inline tasks where we're not dropping DLL to disk, where we're just writing our C# code within it. It is temporary compiled and written to disk in the current account's temporary directory. It's going to have a randomly generated name with multiple file types that are created. And it's all those like the .out, .dll, .pdb, and so forth. It's worth noting that those files are deleted after MSBuild is done executing. But if you monitor like those directories, especially for these files being generated relatively quickly and then deleted, then it's a reasonable indicator that, hey, someone is using inline task, and then the next thing is going to be determining, is this normal or not, right? So here's an example of MSBuild basically creating and deleting these files, or I think this is just the creation part of it. It does also delete it later on, but as you can see, it creates a ton of files. For outbound network connections, we talked a lot how we don't have to host everything locally on disk, right? Like we can host stuff remotely. Well, MSBuild is going to by default use the Microsoft-WebDAV-mini-reader / and a version number for its user agent. So if you have a network proxy and you're seeing that user agent reach out, that probably isn't necessarily super normal, would be my guess. Obviously baseline that for your organization, but that's just something that you can also look for. Finally, the other main ones that we were talking about is when we're dealing with override tasks or task files, those are generally always going to be written, or those will be written within this path that we show. So framework or framework 64, the version number, and then a .override tasks file extension. So if you can look or monitor for the creation of those files within this directory, or these directories, that could be another high fidelity alert that you could build out, because that's probably also not incredibly often. And with that, we got, what, a minute to spare. I think we went through like 100 slides,
Yep.
but we wanted to go fast. Thanks, Jeff. If you have any questions, like, feel free to reach out to us, Twitter, email, whatever. Like, we like talking about this stuff. I think it's fun and interesting. So thank you all for attending. Hopefully this was a useful or interesting talk, and we're happy to help answer any questions that anyone may have, either now or later.
Yeah, and this will be immediately posted over onto our YouTube channel, so people can go over there and rewatch sections or rewatch the whole thing if they want to. Also, you will be getting, for those of you that registered via GoToWebinar, you will be getting a certificate of completion tomorrow around this time. It's usually about 24 hours after, that you can use for CPE credits. But you guys are going to hang out in the Discord for a little bit, right? To answer any questions that people may have?
Not a problem. Happy to.
Okay.
Chris, Joe, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Always a pleasure. Give Mr. Blatt a little grief for me, okay?
Definitely will do. Thank you so much for having us. It's always great to see you all, talk with you, and definitely looking forward to Wild West Hackin Fest.
We can't wait to see you.
Yes, we are too. We're super excited. And did I'm pretty sure that we put a copy of the slides in the Discord server, but if not, we'll make sure to add those over there as well.
Sounds perfect.
All right. Well, you guys have a good day, and thanks again so much for everything. We can't wait to see you.
Thank you. Same here. Have a good one, everyone.
Have a great day, all.